14a. And
14A2.
14a. Yeah, that I don't know. I have to pull up the yard scroll. Where is that it? 14a2? 14a.
That's what I have in my notebook. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Okay, 14a2, yes. So the Gemara that we learned yesterday um, was talk mentioned three brises that seemingly were contradictory. It had to do with the question of women that are nursing or that are pregnant. Do they have to fast? And we're talking about the 13 fasts for drought. When there's a drought, the rabbis established fasts. So they established first 3 fasts, then another 3 fasts, then another 7 fasts. These were for the community, besides the scholars fast. But this is for the community. There were 13 fasts. So the question of the Gemara was, so which ones are the women that are nursing or that are pregnant, are they exempt from fasting? And so we had 3 brises, and they were very contradictory. The first brisa had said that these women fast on the first fast; they don't fast on the last fast. Then we had another brisa that said they fast on the last fast; they don't fast on the first fast. And then we had a third brisa that said they don't fast on the first or the last. So we reconciled all of them by saying there's more than 2. There's actually 3 groups of fast days, and they do fast on the middle, but all the others they don't fast. And by explaining it that way, we come out with the conclusion that there's a first that they don't fast on, there's a first that they do fast on, there's a last that they do fast on, there's a last that they don't fast on, because ultimately, when you say the first and the last, the first could mean the first, meaning the middle, first to the last, or it could mean the last could mean the second to the first. That could mean the last. So we find such terms used, and therefore we could basically answer up all these contradictions, reconcile all of these statements by the fact that the middle fast they do fast. Now, why would it be that way? What would the reason be? Why would they fast the middle fast, not the first and not the last? So the way we explained it, based on Rashi, was that the first fast, Hashem's anger is not it's not as strong yet, so they don't have to. We're not going to overly stress them out for the first fast because it's not so necessary. The middle fasts are more strict, so the middle fast we will have them fast. And for the last fast, there are 7, because it's 7. We're not going to overly burden them, and therefore we exempt them from the last. So the first they're exempt from, the last ones they're exempt from, but the middle ones they would be obligated in, and with that you can reconcile. With that you could reconcile this. Now I did want to mention there's a pasuk that says V'esleya. Let me pull it up over here. The pasuk says V'es V'esleya v'yiladeha achrayim. Here, listen to this pasuk, and you could tell me if you find that fitting with our Gemara. The pasuk says that talking about when Yaakov brought his family back to Israel, and they saw Esav. So it says he brought Leah v'yiladeha and her children achrayim. And then it says v'yas Rachel v'yas Yosef. He brought Rachel and Yosef achrayim.
Right.
So which one was last? Who did he bring? Achrayim means last. So he brought Leah.
Rachel was actually the last.
But it says by both achrayim.
I know.
So here you see that sometimes it could say the achraynos And it doesn't necessarily mean the last. It means second to last. It means last from the first. It was after the original, after the maidservants. In other words, he brought the maidservants and their children, and then he brought Leah and her children afterwards, and then he brought Rachel and her children afterwards.
She had only one child.
Well, it does say children, Yosef, Rachel and Yosef afterwards. So the question is.
That's why I'm saying they were probably last, because Joseph was the youngest, so.
Well, it says it last in the verse also. It does say it last in the verse. That also could be a reason. But the point is that you see here in a pasuk where it sometimes uses the word last, when it talks about Leah here, it uses the word last. And really, who did he really bring last? He brought Rachel and Yosef last. But it says by Leah also the word last. Well, yeah, it says by Leah and her children, it also says last, because after Bilhah and Zilpah, after the maidservants, when Jacob brought the maidservants, he brought afterwards, he brought Leah. So they're last when you relative to Bilhah and Zilpah, they're last. They're later on. And so the word acharonis doesn't necessarily mean the last. It just means the ones afterwards.
My thought on that was that Leah and Rachel were together, but Rachel was after Leah.
Yeah,
because Rachel was only one and one child, so it wouldn't be a group, by itself. So she was together with a group of Leahs, but after Leah.
Rabbi?
Yes, Moshe.
Korinus, you're saying that because it's last, you're saying that this applies to the middle fast would be considered, you don't know whether it's last, but that would be considered the fast that would have been chosen?
Well, the middle could sometimes be called the first. It could sometimes be called the last.
So how do you know? How do you know in that case? That's more definitive. It's more of a defined situation than that. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how would you know if that were the case or not.
Yeah, so you only know because you come to the Levi Yitzchok Retiree Academy.
So, yeah.
You gotta come and learn it. It's in the Gemara.
That's right. You tell them. Go ahead.
So I see that, but I'm just trying to.
It's in the Gemara. You wouldn't know otherwise. It would be a little vague. And you got to come and learn in the Gemara. You find out the conclusion. That's why sometimes it says there are a lot of statements that say that if a person tries to give a verdict based on a Mishnah, he's destroying the world. Why? Because you can't go and see something that it says about a Mishnah and go and make a whole verdict. You can't do that. You have to see if there might be another Mishnah that contradicts it. There might be a brisa that explains it. There might be the Talmud might say that it only applies, might qualify it to a certain specific scenario or certain scenarios. So you can't just conclude based on that. So our Gemara explains that the women that are nursing and that are pregnant, they are obligated in the middle fasts, middle 3, but they are exempt from the first 3 and they're exempt from the last 7. So that's the conclusion. Okay, so and you know how the Gemara figured it out. Because it had contradictions, it was able to understand that how do you reconcile them all? This would be the easiest way to reconcile it. In other words, it made sense now. The Gemara understood it because it fits, everything fits. It made everything fit. By explaining it this way, everything actually works out. All 3 brises are correct. They're saying the same thing. Okay, so the Gemara that we're starting, 14a2, we did do a few lines before at the end of last class, but we'll just start over again. 14a2 in the art scroll. It's if you just have a regular Gemara, it is by the 2 dots on Daf Yud Dalet Amud Aleph, page 14a, and it's the second 2 dots in the page. It's probably about, let's see, 5, 10, 20, 25, maybe 26 or 27 lines from the top of the page on 14a. Okay, if you have the art scroll, it's 14a2, the top of the page.
Ma'elu yeterot.
What is that? Ma'elu
Ma'elu yeterot.
Yeterot. Yes, correct.
Okay.
So the Mishnah had said, how are these 7 fasts more strict than the earlier 3 fasts that you would call the middle fasts? How are the later 7 more strict than the middle? It uses the term Rishonos, the first, but it really means the middle. How are the 7 later ones more strict than the middle? And it says, Elo shebe'elu masriyan v'noyalin es hachanuyos. The way the difference was that these 7, they masriyan, they cry out, and v'noyalin es hachanuyos, and they lock the stores. So, b'mai masriyan, with what do they cry out? And Rabbi Yehuda says shofars, with shofars. And Rabbi Yehuda bereid Rav Shmuel bar Shelas mishmei derav Amar ba'anenu. So Rabbi Yehuda, son of Rav Shmuel bar Shelas, the name of Rav. This is a different Rabbi Yehuda, obviously. He says the masriyan, the word that masriyan, we cry out, refers to a certain prayer called the Anenu prayer, not the Anenu that we talked about for the last 3 weeks, but the Anenu that's in the Slichos, that's in the addition and the different prayers that were added. Those prayers that are added on fast days and before Rosh Hashanah. Some say Slichos before Yom Kippur. Those prayers, there's an Anenu prayer over there, and that prayer is called Masriyan. We cry out. It's a special prayer. Anenu Avinu Anenu Elokei Avram Anenu. The God of Avraham should save me. It's a very nice prayer asking Hashem to save us. So that prayer is it's called crying out. So one opinion is that you cry out with a shofar. The other opinion is that you cry out with the Anenu. Now, I mentioned yesterday that there are different, seems to be a contradiction between this Gemara and a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, where it talks about outside of the Beis Hamikdash, you don't really use the shofar, you use the trumpets. And the trumpets were meant for the fast days, and here it uses the word shofar. So some want to say that it really is interchangeable, and when it says shofar, it sometimes means a trumpet. But others want to say that no, this is specific. This is where we specifically use shofars, and they find ways of reconciling that Gemara there with our Gemara. That in our Gemara really does mean a shofar. They would use a shofar for these fast days. So this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, the first Rabbi Yehuda. The other Rabbi Yehuda, Braid Rav Shmuel, said it means Anenu. Now the Gemara initially assumes that these two opinions are mutually exclusive, which means they don't agree with each other at all. And the conclusion of the Gemara is not that way. Is that they even if you hold one, you still also hold one of the opinions holds both, really. So let's first see how it initially understands. Kosalka Daiton. Initially, it went up in our mind. It was originally assumed Man de Amar ba'anenu, that the opinion that says that you cry out with anenu, lay Amar b'shofars. He doesn't say his opinion. He doesn't agree with the opinion of shofar. It means he holds the shofar was not sounded. Man de Amar b'shofars is the one that says shofars, that you use the shofar to call out and cry out during the last 7 fast days. So he would hold lay Amar ba'anenu. He would say that you don't cry out with the anenu prayer. That they wouldn't recite that prayer. So the Gemara asks, well, Tanya, but we did learn in a brisa that ein poichsin misheva tainiyos ala tzibur. It says that you don't fast less than 7 fasts on the community, which means in the if it still didn't rain, and you already fasted the first 3 and the second group of 3. So the last group, you don't fast less than 7. And during those seven, during those seven, Yudches Hasrois, you do this crying out 18 times. Now, the similar davar, Yericho, and a symbol for this matter is Jericho. Now, what do we know about Jericho? We know that there was a wall around Jericho. When the Jewish people came into Israel, being led by Joshua, what was the first place they went? They went to Jericho. And what did they do? They marched around the wall of Jericho. And ultimately, on the seventh day, they marched around it 7 times. On each of the other 6 days, they marched once. On the seventh day, they marched 7 times. And lo and behold, the wall fell and sunk into the ground. And they did 2 things. They rescued Rachav and her family, because they had promised her that they would save her and her family. And number 2, they burned down the whole city. And I guess number 3 is they took the gold and silver and donated it to the Beis Hamikdash. So this was the city of Jericho. And what did they do during those when they marched around the 7 times around or each day they marched around once, and then the 7th day they marched around 7 times. What did they do? They blew the shofar. They blew the shofar. So what do we do? So on a fast day, it says we don't do less than 7, and on these 7, we have this 18. We have 18 cryings, and the sign of this is Jericho. Now, what does that mean? The sign. What are we connecting to Yericho, to Jericho? What is this comparison that we have with Jericho? So, seemingly, what we're learning from Jericho is that just like in Jericho and Yericho, when they conquered it, they used shofars to conquer it. So the same thing is with now with regard to a fast day. You also use a shofar.
I'm sorry, Rabbi. They say every time they went to war, they sound the shofar anyway.
Okay, but here we're not talking about going to war. Here it's a fast day for a drought. But you're right that we will, that is correct. We're going to be learning about that soon, very shortly. You'll soon see about that. It's on the same page actually. But in the meantime, we're dealing now with the drought fast, and we say that we have a brisa that talks about the 7 fasts, the later 7, the final 7 fasts, and those 7 fasts they would it was at least 7. And they would also have this hasra'ah, which again we're trying to translate what the word means, masri and hasra'is. And we have 2 opinions. It either means shofars or this prayer called Anenu prayer, and then it says here that a symbol for this is Jericho. So from the fact that it says symbol for this is Jericho, we can see that it must mean a shofar, because we don't know that in Jericho that they did this Anenu prayer, but we do know that they blew the shofars. That was one of the big ceremonies of getting the walls, how exactly the walls came down. It was obviously a miracle, but part of it was pretty obvious. The obvious thing that they did was blew the shofars, because it says it clearly in the verses. So this seems to be a proof that they blew shofar, and that was the shofar that on the fast days that we're talking about. It says, compare this. Remember, the symbol for this is Jericho. So if it's telling us a symbol for it is Jericho, it's pretty much clear that we're talking about blowing the shofar. So Masriyan, we sort of have an answer, means blowing the shofar. So where it says, Yericho shofar sava, Yericho, Jericho was with shofar. This proves wrong the opinion that said that Masriyan means you say a prayer. You wouldn't give an example of Jericho if we're talking about, giving a prayer of Anenu. But you would give an example of Jericho if we if we're trying to emphasize that they blew shofar, so you would blow it just like they did for Jericho. So that is that proves the opinion wrong that Masriyan means anenu prayer. It must mean shofar. But the Gemara says, but you know what? It could be we understood it wrong. Maybe we initially thought that each of these views were mutually exclusive. And now we actually are finding out, we see from this, that even the opinion that says it's a prayer, it also is a shofar. And then it won't prove him wrong, because even such an opinion holds you do both. It's not that he held you only do the anenu prayer. You also do the shofar. And this Bryce is emphasizing that there's also a shofar there. And so Ella, the Gemara says, b'shofar is like pligi. No one argues if they blew the shofar. For sure, they blew the shofar as well. And the karele hasra, the shofar is called hasra, and there's no question. So the shofar is sounded even on these type of fast days that were, had to do with a drought. There's no question about that. And everyone agrees, but Ki Pligi, what do they disagree with? They disagree with Ba'anenu, with regard to the prayer of Anenu. And what's a little complicated here is that Rashi, the way Rashi learns, is that the Gemara is now saying that for other types of tragic events, occurrences, there's an argument if you do the anenu prayer. In other words, everyone agrees regarding the fast days, regarding the drought fast days. Everyone agrees that it's you blow the shofar. This is the way the Gemara is answering it. That everyone agrees those you blow the shofar. But the question is, so in other words, does Masriyan mean shofar? For sure it means shofar. What about regarding days that aren't drought fast days, but they're fast days for other types of suffering and sorrows that Yidden are going through? So I'm going to read for you this Rashi because it's very important. It's 8 lines up from the bottom of the page. It says, Ki pligi ba'anenu. When do they argue? They argue with anenu. Rashi says, Ki pligi b'masriyan. When do they argue with the word masriyan? The amrinon bialma al shar peronios that we say in general with regard to other sufferings. Mar savar anenu nami hasra. This opinion, master holds that anenu also means hasra. V'hai diktani bialma masriyan ba'anenu. This that we talk in general about masriyan for other fast days, other saras, challenging situations. It means anenu. Man de'amar b'shayfrais aval ba'anenu lai. The other opinion says, but by other fast days, it's only a shofar and not anenu. So it comes out from this way of understanding it. Again, this is the way Rashi is translating the Gemara. The Gemara left itself a little vague. It just says that when do they argue? They argue in anenu, and they all agree that it means a shofar, but they argue about anenu. But he doesn't clarify, is there a difference between rain fast days or regular fast days? The Gemara doesn't clarify it. So Rashi tells us that there is a difference. That on the fast days for droughts, everyone agrees that it's shofar, that they blew the shofar, and everyone agrees that they did not do the anenu, believe it or not. this is slightly different than you would like think from reading the Gemara, but this is the way Rashi understands it, that they would not say the Anenu prayer. We're retracting from that, but they would do the Anenu on other other types of fast days that are not because of drought. Then this opinion would hold that you do both shofar and Anenu, and the other opinion says you only do the shofar and you don't do Anenu. That's when they argue about the Anenu regarding the other fast. Mar Savar Kari Le Hasra. This opinion says Anenu is called Hasra. And when we talk about other fast days, other misfortunes, so they would do the Anenu, and would they also blow the shofar on the other fast days? So Rashi seems to leave it out, like they wouldn't. Maybe they wouldn't even do the shofar on the other fast days, not for drought, for other fast days. That this opinion holds it means Anenu and not a shofar, and the other opinion holds they would blow the shofar and not do the Anenu. So in other words, the argument really stays. We should say that they still hold it's mutually exclusive, but not regarding the drought fast. These two opinions are mutually exclusive regarding other fast days. So Mar Savar, this master holds that it's called Hasra, that saying Anenu is called Hasra, and you therefore on other fast days that are not connected with drought, you would say the Anenu and not blow the shofar. Umar Savar loy kari le Hasra, you do not call Anenu Hasra, and when we say that they would do the Hasra and other types of fast days that are not connected to drought, so then you would only blow the shofar and not do the Anenu. Again, this is a little vague because Rashi himself doesn't say it so clearly, but this is the way one of the commentaries explains Rashi, and I'm just going to follow that in the meantime, and we'll see. Maybe we'll go into the other commentaries after. But this is the way the Gemara is answering this proof about Jericho. They blew the shofar. We're basically saying that the fast days that have to do with rain are connected to the what they did at Jericho, where they blew the shofar, and here also we would blow the shofar. Now, with regard to the other types of fast days, there is an opinion of about what the word Masrian refers to regarding those fast days. In Rav Yehuda, Rav Yehuda holds it means the shofar, and Rav Yehuda, the son of Rav Shmuel Bar Shelas, in the name of Rav, would say it means the Anenu. So now the Gemara says,
Rabbi,
yes.
Regarding the shofar or the Anenu, I think the shofar is more to impress the people that you are going to fight and scare them. But Anenu is a request directly to Hashem. So there is a different target by using Anenu or by using the shofarot.
Says who?
Why do you say that?
Well, you think that the shofar impresses Hashem or tells him we are asking your help? Anenu tells Hashem we are asking your help.
Well, shofar is sort
and
of like
the rain is not a war against people. The rain is a request from Hashem.
And Anenu is right, but the thing is, Anenu is a request from Hashem. But the shofar is also like a way of crying out to Hashem in a way that we're like a child begging Hashem without words, almost. You know, it's like a child just asking Hashem to help us. You know, it's it's
noisy
kind of child that can't even speak. Okay? He's not even of age to speak, but he's in pain. You know, there is that element in blowing the shofar. Now, obviously, it has power.
I see here that the shofar, as far as Jericho, they say something about 18 blows on the shofar, not 7.
So the 18 has to do with the on the fast day. Now, even that is, what does that refer to? What does it mean that we would blow 18? So the commentaries question what it means if we blow 18. Basically, the understanding is that you blow, every time you blow the shofar, you blow a tekiah, a teruah, and a tekiah. So if there are an extra 6 brachas in the Shmona Esrei, and in each of those brachas, you blow a tekiah, a teruah, and tekiah. So 6 times 3 equals 18.
Yeah.
Right? So it sounds like they would blow these 18 blasts during the Shmona Esrei. For the additional brachas that were added. Okay. Now, what I'm telling you is not so simple, because really it says they blew the shofar even on the bracha of Goyel Yisrael, which would make it 21. So why does it say 18? Yeah. Right? It says 18, but really, if when we reach it, you're going to see it doesn't really flow, because really they would blow the shofar 20. It seems they blow it 21 times. So the commentaries are all struggling to have to the extent that the Vilna Gaon wants to change the wording and say that it means that it should say 21 here. That's how far he goes. He says let's just switch it to 21 because otherwise it won't fit with the other Gemara. But the understanding of some of the commentaries is that it says 18 because it's only talking about the extra brachas, the blowings that you would do with the extra brachas. It's not talking about the blowing that you did with the regular brachas. And Goyel Yisrael is a regular bracha that we always say, so it doesn't mention it. Anyway, maybe we'll look more into it after. But that's the but it basically is saying 18, and they would blow these tekiah, teruah, and tekiah. Again, tekiah is the long blast, tekiah, and then the teruah is in between, which is some type of a broken type of a blast, like do or do. And then the final blast was also a long solid blast, do. So those are we're calling that 3 blasts: a solid, a broken, and a solid. Okay, now so the Gemara now says, Laman Damar Ba'anenu, the opinion that says that when it says Masriyan, it could mean Anenu, Kolshkein B'Shofros. Certainly, the word Masriyan could mean shofar. And so it could mean both. In other words, in our Mishnah, Masriyan means shofar. The way we're learning it so far. Our Mishnah, Masriyan means shofar. In the case where it talks about other types of fasts, Masriyan means anenu. So it could mean both. Ulamanda Amar b'shofros, but the opinion that says that it means shofros, which was the plain Rav Yehuda, so he holds avo ba'anenu loy, but it doesn't refer to anenu ever. So the Gemara asks, V'hatanya, didn't we learn in a brisa usha'ar kol mine piraniyos hamisragshos, all other types of punishments that that gather to going chichoch. For example, when a person has a type of scratching, or when a community, a village has a chichoch problem, they're all scratching, and it has something to do with dry boils, and so such a thing, chagav, locusts, if there's some type of a plague of locusts, zuvov, flies, tsira, wasps, v'yitushim, mosquitoes, v'shiluach nechashim v'akrabim, and the sending of snakes and scorpions, meaning sending from Hashem, of snakes and scorpions. Interesting how it uses that term, the sending of snakes and scorpions. So all of these loy hayu masriyan ela tsayakin. It says they would not cry out, or they would not do masriyan. What would they do? They would be tsayakin. They would, which both literally mean, both seemingly refer to crying out. But tsayakim is a word we all know. It means with our mouth we cry out. And masriyan is where we're not sure what it means. But this brisa tells us that there are certain types of plagues that we don't do what they would do at these fast days, which we called masriyan. For these, you would be tsayakin. You would just, sort of like call out for begging, to beg Hashem for mercy, ask Hashem for mercy. You would do tsayakin. You would cry out. But you wouldn't do the masriyan. These are not as severe, as serious. Even though they seem to be, some type of plague. I mean, you have some type of plague of mosquitoes or of snakes, scorpions, but it's not as serious. Now we are talking about.
No, wait. Masriyan seems to be a slower kind of, Hashem, help us out, we're bothered. Tsayakim sounds like we're just screaming. These are worse plagues that come in. They hit you suddenly and you just cry out.
So the understanding is that we're talking about even snakes and scorpions that injure and don't kill, and that's what we're referring to in this brisa. And so
then what do we do? Masriyan or tsayakim?
And here we only are tsayakin. Like hayu masriyan ela tsayakin. Now, if it was so much worse, we would do both, maybe.
I'm not sure. I think masriyan is. What is the steps physically to describe masriyan?
So 1 second. Let's finish up, and then we'll go back to.
Okay.
Midatzaka bepet. So since tzaka means with calling out with your mouth, and that is obviously what tzaka means. So because we know what the word means, so hasra, which we're not sure what it means, but if tzaka is bepet, hasra must mean b'shayfres. It must mean with a shayfer. So that must refer to a shayfer. And what this would seemingly prove wrong is that you can't say hasra'a means with a you can't say that hasra'a means anenu. It definitely means a shayfer. How can you say hasra'a means the anenu prayer? You see here clearly with regard to other types of disasters, other types of not drought fast, but other types of things. We're dealing with other types of issues. And what do we say? That you blow with the shofar. Now, according to the way we understood the Gemara before, that one opinion says that that masriyan in such cases means with a anenu prayer, and the other opinion says that masriyan means with the shofar. We see clearly here that it means with the shofar, right? Again, we had a problem because we had an argument between what does masriyan refer to, and the Gemara proved earlier that when it comes to the 7 fasts of the drought, we said it must mean over there a shofar. We proved it because it says similar to Jericho. Symbol of it is Jericho. So the Gemara's conclusion, the way the Gemara answered it, the way we explained it according to Rashi, is that you're right. When it comes to fast days that have to do with drought, it refers to shofar. The word masriyan always means they blow the shofar. When it comes to other types of fast days that have to do with other types of plagues, then masriyan, you have an argument. Masriyan might mean anenu or it might mean shofar. That was the way we reconciled earlier. So now we come to a case where we talk about other types of punishments, and we mention here that you don't do the masriyan if they're not so serious. And how are we translating you don't do the masriyan? So it seems pretty clearly that you don't do the Masriyan. Masriyan here means the shofar because we talk about Sa'aka, crying with your mouth. So in other words, you do something with asking Hashem for mercy with your mouth, but Masriyan you don't do, and that seems to mean a shofar. So it seems to prove wrong the way we explained earlier that for other types of disasters you'd say anenu, and that's what Masriyan means. It doesn't seem to fit. So the Gemara has a very simple answer, and it says you're right, but you're wrong. You're right that here Masriyan means shofar, but you're wrong thinking that this is the only view. There are other views as well. You can't prove one rabbi wrong because a different rabbi said one thing. There's other sources as well that he follows. Tanoihi, the Gemara says this is an argument of the Tanoim. The Tanoim debated this, the Tanya, because we have a brisa al elu masriyan b'Shabbos. For these types of troubles, you can cry out on Shabbos, and it uses the word masriyan. So we're not sure what masriyan means, but we're trying to say maybe it could mean anenu. On these we are masriya on Shabbos al ir sheki for Gaius, on a city that was surrounded by a type of by troops, by an army, a nahar or a river that has it's threatening to flood a town, and Val Svina Hamaterefes Bayam, or on a boat that is shaking, or suspected of sinking, danger of sinking in the sea. And so on these you do masri. Rabbi Yosi says you can only call out le'ezra avaloi letza'aka, but you can't call out for your prayers, but you can call out to ask people to help you. So the Gemara says, "B'mai, what are we talking about? Ilema b'shofros, could we be talking about a shofar that on Shabbos you would blow the shofar? It can't be. Mishari, is it permitted to blow the shofar on Shabbos? There's a rabbinic prohibition of blowing shofar on Shabbos. So we wouldn't be blowing the shofar on Shabbos, and it says we are masriyan on Shabbos for these type of dangers. So what must it mean? So the Gemara says, Elalav ba'anenu. It must mean with the prayer called anenu v'kari lahasra. In this prayer, the Mishnah, this Mishnah is calling hasra. Actually, it said Detanya, but the commentaries say it should say Detanan, which means a Mishnah, not a brisa. So basically, it's called. We're calling it hasra. This Mishnah, we're calling it hasra, crying out. So Shema Mina, we hear from this that we have a source that hasra sometimes could mean anenu prayer. So that's the conclusion of this discussion, that the hasra could mean. So the Gemara ends off Shema Mina. We hear from this that basically the anenu could mean hasra, or the shofar could mean hasra. And the way the Gemara understands it is that regarding the drought fast, they would blow the shofar. Regarding other types of dangers, they would say the anenu prayer. And if it was on Shabbos, they would of course they didn't blow the shofar for these other types of fast days, for these other types of dangers. This Mishnah tells us that what they would do would be, it was an argument. Rabbi Yosi says you're not allowed to do the masriyan, which would mean the anenu. You can't do the anenu prayer, which is interesting. We've talked about this before, about what types of prayers can you do to call out for help from Hashem, beg Hashem for help on Shabbos. Because as we say in our Misha Berach, Shabbos hi milizoik. It is Shabbos from calling, begging for help from Hashem. That to some extent that there are certain things that you're not really supposed to do on Shabbos. But Ezra, you could ask for others to come and help. That you would be allowed to do. And Rashi over here says that he explains a little. He says, if you look on the bottom two lines of the Rashi says, Tefillah, you're not allowed to cry out with prayer. We aren't so convinced that our prayer will help. To be allowed to call out on Shabbos. It would be like calling out like in vain on Shabbos. Alma tzaikas peh kari hasra. So we see from here that calling out with the with your mouth, that's called masriyan. That's basically what the Gemara understands. That's how you see from the Gemara that that it must mean hasra. It must mean anenu. So then Rashi brings another shot here that laEzra, the lashon acher laEzra, the kamatana kama masriyan, the mashma b'koil ram. From laBrezi laEzra she must balin kalecha b'veisa laEzra ba'alma. That he says you're allowed to call out that when the Tanakama, when the earlier opinion says masriyan, which sounds like koil ram, with you make big announcements. So Rabbi Yossi says you could say it, you could daven laEzra ba'alma, just regular asking for prayer in your home, and you can't make big announcements of the anenu, but you could do it maybe privately. You could daven in your house. You could do it privately, but not in the communal setting. Yes.
I want to say, when they say lo hayu matriyin ela tzoakin, that means that matriyin is not tzoakin.
So what is the difference?
Tzoakin is an instrument, is what they say.
No, matriyin is an instrument.
I'm sorry, matriyin is the instrument.
Yeah.
Tzoakin is by mouth.
Correct.
And they say that they don't do the matriyin ela tzoakin. That means there is a difference. It's not the same. It's not
and
the same
it proves that masriyan is a shofar.
Right.
Right. And
right.
that sounds
Because
like
it's
a
an
question.
instrument.
It's an instrument, a shofar.
Right. Right.
So that's the Gemara's question. What is the Gemara's answer?
I didn't get that far.
That's the next piece. We just did it. That the Mishnah, there's a Mishnah that follows the other view. The Mishnah uses the word masriyan to mean anenu. The Mishnah uses the word masriyan to refer to anenu. That's the next piece. Okay, we're going to continue. We're on the bottom line of the Gemara, and if you're in the art scroll, we are on 14a3, the last little paragraph. So the bottom line of the Gemara. In the years, let me mute everyone over here. Bishnei Reb Yehuda Nasiya, in the years of Reb Yehuda the prince. Now, often this refers to the grandson of the author of the Mishnah of Reb Yehuda Hanasi. But I believe here it actually is referring to the grandson of the grandson, like the great-great-grandson, because it's from the other names that are here. It seems like it's the great-great-grandson. Anyway, in the years of Reb Yehuda Nasiya, Hava Tzaira, there was some type of a challenge of distress, pain that the people were going through. So, Gazar Tlas Esrei Tainios. So they decreed 13 fasts. Veloy Iani. And they were not answered. So what do you do then? If you're not answered after 13, what did we have in our Mishnah? In our Mishnah, it said you for a drought, you do 13. And it mentioned the first 3, the second 3, and the 7. And then it said altogether 13. So I mentioned, why does the Mishnah have to give us a calculation and add up 3 plus 3 plus 7? That's any person can add it up and know that it's 13. Why does the Mishnah have to say a total of 13? Because I said one of the commentaries says it's telling us that you never do more than 13 fasts, right? That's for a drought. For a drought, you don't do more than 13. Here, in other words, if it doesn't rain, it doesn't rain. You don't do more than 13. It didn't rain, too bad. We're not going to fast. We're not going to tell the community to fast more than 13 fasts. What happened here? It was in the days of this Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, there was some type of a suffering that people were going through, a plague, a tsaira, it uses the word, some pain, something people were going through. And he established these 13 fasts. He decreed them. And they weren't answered. So Savar Lemigzar Tvei, he thought maybe I should do more. Maybe I should add. Amar le Ravami, and Ravami told him, Hare Amru, the rabbi said, In matrichin asatzibur yosimidai. You shouldn't burden the community more than overly. You shouldn't overly burden them too much. Yosimidai means too much. You shouldn't burden them too much. Which he basically was saying, Ravami was telling this Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, 13, you did it, don't do any more. Don't decree anymore. Amar Rababa Barid Rab Chia Barabba. So Rababa, the son of Rab Chia Barabba, said, Rab Ami Da'avid Legarmehu David. Rab Ami, that said this thing, don't do more, he did this for himself because he had a hard time. For him, he couldn't or didn't want to continue fasting, and so he told Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya that don't do it, which sounds a little surprising. Like he cared about himself, he didn't want to fast anymore, so he told him not to. Ella, but really, rather. Hacha Amar Reb Chia Barabba Amar Reb Yochanan. Reb Chia Barabba says the name Reb Yochanan, Leishanu Ela Legeshamim. This limit of 13 is only for rain. Other types of fast days, you actually are meant to continue fasting until you get answered from heaven, which means that there's a difference between rain fasts and other fasts. And for rain fasts, it would actually make sense that you would stop after those 13 because at a certain point, you don't benefit from the rain. For other fasts, you want that plague to get removed. For rain, drought, what's it going to help if it rains it actually ruins things if it rains in the summer. The rain in the winter is beneficial in Israel. Rain in the summer ruins things. So the Gemara says that for rain, you're limited to 13. The Reb Chia Barabba says that for rain, you're limited to 13. For other types of suffering, punishments, you continue fasting until you get answered. Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a brisa like this as well. Pisha Amru Shalish, Sheva, when they said 3, they said 7. Like Amru Al-Gasham, they said that for rain. They continue fasting until they get answered. So that is the Gemara. That is the story here. And then the Gemara says, Lema Tevi Tiyufta de Rav Ami. Let's say that this proves Rav Ami wrong because Rav Ami wanted to stop it and said, don't do anymore. You have to stop. So Amalach Rav Ami. So Rav Ami will tell you that it's Tanoihi. It's really an argument of Tanoim regarding this rule, if it applies to other types of challenging situations, or is it only applied to rain? Amalach, it's Tanoihi. The Tanya, because we learned in a brisa, in Geyser Yoser Mishalish Esri Tinius Al Tzibur, you don't decree more than 13 fasts for a community. We don't want to burden the community too much. Divrei Rebbe, these are the words of Rebbe. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer. Reb Shimon Gamliel says, Leiman Hashem Uzeh. That is not the reason why we don't do more than 13. Rather, Ella, the reason not doing more than 13 is because Mipnei Sheyotzes Mana Shel Revius, the time of the rain has passed, and there's no more reason to do more fasts because it's not going to help. But Rebbe felt that the reason is we don't do more than 13 has to do with the burdening the community, which would mean that it would apply to all types of fasts. If you don't want to burden the community, there's no difference between a fast day for drought or a fast for other things. But if it has to do with, there's no reason to fast because we don't want more rain, because there's not going to help. More rain won't help. So then you would, if more rain won't help, then you'll say that only applies to the rain. But when it comes to other types of disasters or tragedies or the suffering or dangers for other things, you would fast even more than 13 fasts, because the limit of 13 had to do with the rain issue, because there's no need for more. We don't want more rain because it's not going to help if we get more rain. It's not going to benefit us. But for other things, maybe it would. So that's the argument. Rebbe and Reb Shimon Gamliel is basically this argument. Do we apply this rule to other types of fasts or not? Do we say it has to do with too many, we don't want to burden them too much, or do we want to say it has to do with rain? So this is basically the conclusion of this little piece of Gemara. We're going to stop here. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you,
Good to see
Rabbi.
you, Julian. Haven't seen you in a while, Julian. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
How are you?
Well, thanks. I've just been preoccupied, other things, but
Okay, nice to see you. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebbe.
Okay.